Welcome to the Think Factory podcast. We got one question for you. What keeps you up at night?
Welcome to the Think Factory's Workplace Podcast, powered by OGC Solutions. My name is Alka Bahal. I'm a partner with Outside General Counsel Solutions and the chair of our Corporate Immigration Services Group. I'll be your host today. I'm very pleased to have with me Tom Redding, Executive Vice President and Healthcare Practice Leader at St. Onge Company. Welcome to the podcast, Tom.
Thanks so much for having me join, Alka.
My pleasure. So why don't we start by telling our listeners a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah. So thanks for the opportunity to join. And I think for myself, again, I kind of a little bit of an interesting journey, from starting in mechanical engineering to, doing a lot of work around process improvement. And about 18 years ago, I joined St. Onge Company, focused on improving healthcare. So again, a lot of the work we're doing is, again, focused around, facility planning and design. So helping, health systems expand and make sure they have all the right infrastructure from a support services standpoint. And we do a significant amount of work around process improvement. So it could be within, the sterile processing department, pharmacy, or supply chain, or, any of those types of departments. We also, focus a lot around, that clinical process improvement. So again, we have a pretty good perspective on, how the, health systems run and how they run behind the scenes. So again, certainly appreciate the opportunity to join today.
Very interesting work you do. Let's focus on you first. So I understand you were just promoted to EVP. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that.
So tell us a little bit about your journey. You've been with St. Onge for 18 years. You started in project management and worked your way up to EVP. Tell me about that process.
It's funny, yeah, because I actually, when you think about many years ago, like, what do you want to do when you go to college, and and all these things. I had these ambitions to design race cars and do all those types of things. And I realized pretty quickly that's probably not where my time and energy should be. And, as I've kind of worked my way through more distribution and manufacturing environments, I kind of just fell into St. Onge. And, my neighbor at the time kind of recommended me to St. Onge. They were a client of St. Onge. And I had applied, and it was interesting. They're like, hey, do you want to work in our healthcare environment? It's very, very new, at the time. And, I said, sure, I'll try it. And, I think over the last 18 years, it's been an interesting journey for me to see so many different health systems. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of health systems, and to see the ones that are the leaders in the considered leaders in the market, the ones that are maybe laggers, and to understand the differences and how do you kind of drive those health systems that want to be, best in class. How do you help them kind of move up the curve? And the ones that are at the top of the list, for lack of better words, the ones that, how do you get even better, and how do you prepare for the future? And there's so much to do in healthcare. Mm-hmm. I always say that in general, healthcare supply chain is about 20 years behind. So there's a lot of catching up to do and a lot of things to help the industry.
Mm-hmm. And after 17 years with the company, what has kept you engaged and motivated? Is it the St. Onge approach? Is it the industry? Is it the feedback you're getting from the clients that you're helping?
I think it's a combination of things. One is just the variety of projects. Like I had mentioned earlier, I was in the more manufacturing distribution space, and I just honestly got bored. It was kind of like the same thing every single day, and you just kind of get into the hamster wheel. I think for me, the exciting thing about St. Onge is you're working with many different clients, many different types of projects, many different challenges along the way. So for me, like that's exciting to help clients kind of take from where they are today and to think about, a couple years, could be 6 months to a couple years down the road to them kind of seeing significant improvement. So I think for me, that's exciting. I think that's kind of what has kept me at St. Onge. I will say, just being in healthcare space and working with healthcare clients. I mean, I had an opportunity many years ago to work at Walter Reed down in Washington, D.C. and just to see a number of the patients coming back, the soldiers coming back with amputees and, amputated legs and arms and all those types of things. It kind of puts in perspective of why you're doing that. It's not just, hey, I'm trying to get this box to your front door faster. It's also like, what are you really doing? What do you want to make an impact on? And for me, I think it's I think it's incredible to feel like we're working with hundreds of clients and we're able to help, quite frankly, millions of patients get better care and better support, while they're in the hospital or in the care environment.
And tell me, what is the ideal client profile to benefit from St. Ange's services?
Yeah, I would say in general, I mean, I think obviously if it's a hospital in the, 150 to 200 beds and greater, I think one of the things that we're doing more and more work around is as these health systems are getting larger, it doesn't have to be one hospital versus two. It could be, hey, as these hospitals are getting larger over time and it's getting more complex and you can't work in a silo in each of these individual facilities. It's like, how do you start operating and functioning like a health system? I think that's where St. Ange can, one, is help define that strategy of what to do, but also the plans and help execute to get to where they need to be. So I think, from just a single hospital, you're like, hey, it should be, north of 150, but we have many clients that are less than that size and they have very specific needs and very specific challenges. And again, for us, it's really about trying to tailor the work we're doing. We're not trying to say, this is what, Johns Hopkins is doing, you should go do that too, and you're a critical access hospital. It's really about tailoring the work that we're doing to their particular concern or challenge. So it's not I would say it's not a one size fits all approach to the work we're doing.
Right, very customized to whatever they particularly need.
Exactly. Yep.
And hospitals are quite well known for growing by acquisition. So I would imagine there's a lot of work in that space where we need to streamline processes, gain some efficiencies of scale, where a system has grown by adding on different hospitals and not looked at themselves as a system as a whole. Can you give us some examples of how you would assist a system to develop or improve their processes? People may not understand, how does process engineering relate to healthcare?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because we were working with a health system about a year or so ago, and they were about 12-ish hospitals, and they were kind of knitted together over the last few years. And one thing that was very apparent is that, there was a lot of energy around clinical integration, but there was very little effort around support service integration. So whether it's consistent contracts between the different facilities or, using the same types of systems or even the workflows. So if I'm in hospital A and I'm doing receiving and delivery, do I have different workflows? And if I'm a technician and I'm potentially moving in between facilities, and it's like every time I go to a different one, it's like learning a whole new workflow. It's like you started a whole new company. Like there's value in consistency. There's value in measuring, the performance of those individual locations. And if you're doing different activities, you really can't compare whether you're consistent or not. So for us, I think as these integrations happen, it's just to do that initial assessment to understand how consistent you are. And that might be from a organizational structure standpoint. It could be just overall distribution logistics, how you're doing things. So that's like, it could be, the supply distribution aspect of it, or the overall couriers could have multiple different couriers depending on locations you're supporting. It could be potentially contracts. It could be, anything around just general operations and workflows, and potentially some places are doing workarounds, other places are not. So you might find that there's some gold nuggets between these different locations of what they're doing and potentially best practices that could apply. So for us, it's really just understanding how can we operate more consistently and provide the same level of service from one facility to the next versus you get better service at one location versus the other.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So your career trajectory has brought you into multiple leadership positions, growing responsibility. What leadership lessons have you learned through your career that you're carrying forward?
I think I would say probably the first and foremost is that just because I did it a certain way doesn't mean that everybody should do it the same way as that I went through. I would say this even goes back to, how you develop the story and how do you convey recommendations to a client, like how I've done things over the years and how I would approach it might be different than somebody else. And again, I think there's many different ways to get to the end game or the end, point, and end up still in a very similar recommendation, but say it differently to convey the message. So I think that's probably a step one is the autonomy to be able to do things and try things and not just say, hey, this is exactly how you should do it, and because it worked for me. There's certain things that I know that won't work for me that work for others. So I think that's first and foremost. I think the other thing is just the importance of getting better. Again, I think for me, I have a very kind of improvement mindset in general. It doesn't matter what I'm doing. So I think, as I always say, we have to leave the business in a better spot than what we started every single year. So I think that's investing in ourselves personally, investing in ourselves as a company, and just also investing in the tools and things we're doing to provide support for our clients and make sure that we're providing value as a company to our clients. So if our services are not providing the value, whether those should go away or whether we should have other services. So I think for me, it's like that continuous, like, not just like sitting on your hands and saying, life is good, just kind of ride this out. I think we have to have a self-improvement mindset. I think that's probably the most critical thing.
And as you mentioned, different leaders have different leadership styles. How do you view these different styles as influencing workplace dynamics, and how can leaders adapt their approach to different teams or situations? Or should they?
Well, I think I think you have to recognize, even if you have a manager or supervisor, or whoever, they have their own skill sets, they have their own strengths and weaknesses, and I think you have to, as leaders, managers, and folks, consultants that are engineers that are working on projects, you have to see where there's strength in those different leaders and say, hey, listen, this person's really good at conveying the message. This person's really good at negotiating or having conversations with the client or keeping the client in a say in check, but just because sometimes things get a little bit unwieldy where people are trying to get free work out of something. So I think all these things, as we look at it, it's not like, hey, everybody looks at Tom as like the gold standard. Again, I would say there's certain things that I might do well. There's certain things that leaders on the team do well. And I think folks have to kind of learn those and understand it and make sure that that they're learning from a lot of different folks, not just one person. And I think it's not easy, but again, I think, as you look at the people around you and how do you leverage their strengths, I think that's important.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What would you say are three essential traits for effective leadership in the workplace today?
Effective traits well, I think it's important to be, like I mentioned earlier, just around flexibility. So again, I think a lot changes. It's easy to say, hey, I made this decision, and therefore I'm just going to stick to it, and I'm not going to change regardless of any additional information I have. So I think we have to be flexible, but not be, so flexible that it becomes nobody knows what to do. So I think that's an important aspect of it. I think any leader that is successful, I think, has to have a natural curiosity about how the business runs. And I think understanding not just like, hey, this is my role or this is what I'm doing. I think you have to think about it in the context of how do all these things fit together, and how do I leverage all the things that are going on the most effectively. So I think that curiosity is, and I think that's a trait that, again, even our employees we want to have, is that curiosity. And I think the last one is, the work that we're doing and just in general, we're running a business is hard at times. So I think you just have to, have that, I would call it, for lack of better words, grit. I mean, sometimes you got to push through things, you get challenges, you have to do all that. And I think you have to be able to, handle those tough situations and work through them. Again, it's no different than our employees are the same aspect. I mean, we expect them to work through some of these challenges we have and not just throw your hands up and say, it's not my problem anymore.
Yeah,
so, yeah, I would say
nobody's problem and never gets solved, right?
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah. So I think there's a combination of things there.
And turning our focus a little bit more towards the workplace, the modern workplace has moved into an unprecedented era where we have 5 generations working at the same time, all the way from, I don't even know what each generation is called, the Z's, millennials, through the Gen X's, but a wide age range, right? Early 20s, all the way maybe even up to the 80s. So this is probably reflected in your workplace, as it is in most workplaces these days. How does this affect workplace dynamics and management, in particular communication?
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, I would. Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I just had a conversation yesterday with, a gentleman that's kind of, late, very, very late in his career, late 70s. And, just the, what he needs or what he needs to support or, being able to, kind of help him through something versus giving some basic direction on something. And then they go figure out the other pieces of it. I will say it is about just the community. You can't have the same message to everybody. I mean, I think that's the easy button to say, hey, this is what it is, or this is what we have to do. But again, I think maybe if you're maybe older, you wanted a little more, kind of called out. You want to be a little more discreet. Others probably want a little more latitude. Don't feel like they want to be kind of, told what to do, or they want the flexibility to try it on their own and kind of fail fast or whatever. I think I just think you have to tailor the message to the audience you're talking to. So if there's conflict on projects, or whether it's somebody doesn't know something and there's an insecurity associated with it because they don't have the experience, like you have to accommodate and be mindful of like how they're going to react to the message. And if you don't, and you just assume, hey, this is what it is, and you'll fill in the blanks yourself, I just don't think that's going to happen. So I think that's probably the biggest thing, is just the tailoring of the message and being mindful of like how they, generationally, how they grew up and what was important to them versus others. It's just different.
Yeah, it really is. Do you find it challenging to get your management team to recognize those differences, or do you think it's quite readily apparent just because of the way different people are functioning?
I think we have a lot of conversations about it. So I would say in general, I think that certainly the management team knows that. I think there's some times where it's kind of like, this is kind of the message we have to convey, and we have to manage the outliers, for lack of a better word. So again, I think there's a combination of things that have to be considered. Again, I think if you have to say, well, you're one of the interesting things we did a while back, and it was just more to learn, is we did the disc profile just to understand kind of what the different personalities are. And, obviously generational things have an impact to the communication, but just how you work with somebody. I might find that I'm maybe not as detail oriented, where somebody else needs every step of the way. And if they don't have every piece of the puzzle, they just kind of throw their hands up. So I think you also have to recognize, like, maybe it's also, there's a personality aspect of it has to be considered. And that ability to be direct versus saying, hey, I just need to kind of work through this with them and kind of step by step help them through it, versus just saying, hey, you have to do this or you have to do that. Again, I think it's just the message has to be tailored for sure.
Mm-hmm. That's a good way to frame it. So looking at the into recruitment then and building your teams, what are some critical skills or initiatives or mindsets that you're looking for in your workforce when you're hiring?
Yeah, I would say it's similar to what I shared earlier. I think, that natural curiosity, and we always try to think about how do we test for natural curiosity? Because again, I always say there's, that there's like three different types of people. You get the box from IKEA that shows up, and, there's the folks that get the directions. The directions are in the box, and they take the box and they just ship it back and say, send me a new one with the directions. And then there's some that'll just sit there and cry in the corner and wonder why this is being done to them like this, and they don't understand what happened in the universe. And then there's some folks who'll just say, hey, I'll figure this out. I'm curious enough. I'll look at the letters. I'll do these things. I'll work through it. So I think the last one is the one that we want at St. Onge, to be able to think through those things versus like throw your hands up and say, this is just too hard. So trying to test for that is always a bit of a challenge, but I think asking enough questions and scenarios to be able to kind of ferret through that is kind of an important step for us. I think the second one, as again, probably similar, is just the flexibility. Again, our work changes a lot. Client expectations change a lot. We have people that we start working on a project with, they leave to go to another organization. Next person comes in, they don't have the same approach, the same, expectations or whatever. And you got to be flexible in that environment. Mm-hmm. It's not like you get used to your boss and you kind of know what they expect from you. And that unknown goes away. Again, in our environment, it's a constant flux, constant change. And the last one is, again, it's again similar to the same. It's just the grit, the persistence to be able to kind of work through things. Again, we have times where, again, clients send us the data last minute and they don't change the deadline, it won't change the deadline. And we have to work through those things. Ideally, we have the flexibility to change the schedule or adjust things because we don't want to, I would say, for lack of better words, cut corners. So I think that's an important step to be able to like, hey, listen, I got to work through this. I got to put the time. I got to, kind of press through the work we're doing and obviously not compromise on quality. But yeah, it's never easy. And again, I think clients hire us with the expectation that again, we've done this many, many times, and that's true, but that doesn't mean you can do it at the speed of light either. There's a certain amount of time it takes to understand their business. It's a certain amount of time to apply, the analytics, a certain amount of time to apply and understand kind of how we can do to improve their operation. So it doesn't just happen with a button click, So I think it's just a matter of those things require a little more kind of finesse and discussion.
That ties in really well with what you were talking about before in terms of the key traits for leadership. So, you're basically hiring those workers that are going to do well at their job and become effective leaders in the future.
Mm-hmm. That's what we want. And it's, again, I would say that, we've had some folks that have joined that say, listen, I want the excitement of the variety and the change, but then you realize pretty quickly that maybe you want to be in the job where you're, what every Tuesday looks like. And for some folks, that's fantastic. Others would just be bored to death. So it's just a matter of kind of what you want, what motivates you.
Absolutely right. And the level of challenge and variety that you're looking for. I love the IKEA story. That is just a fantastic description.
It's true. I'm telling you, it's true. People will like sit there and cry in the corner. You know what I mean? Like, you're like, I don't know what to do. Like, I don't, this is happening to me. It's like, yeah, it just happens. It's life. You got to adjust.
Yeah, it's really eye-opening to me because it wouldn't occur to me to sit in the corner and cry. It wouldn't occur to me to return it.
I guarantee it, people will. I'm telling you.
Oh, wow.
I'm telling you.
Very, very interesting. So looking at talent acquisition and retention, what are some key factors driving talent acquisition and retention in this very competitive job market?
Yeah, I think from a talent acquisition standpoint, we want folks that want to improve the work they're doing. They don't just see this as a job. They don't just see this as like, hey, I'm just kind of putting in my time. Like they want to go and to their, again, working with their local hospital or local health system, and they want to feel like, hey, listen, I'm making an impact. I'm helping my community. I'm helping other communities. I'm helping, the broader, environment that we're working in. Those are the folks that we won. So I think for us is like, hey, we're working with the best. We talk a lot about like the top 20 health systems in the country. That we're working with 17 of the top 20, and and that resonates with a lot of folks around just wanting to work with the best and not just saying, hey, I'm just working on a couple of random projects. There's these well-known projects, well-known clients. So I think that's a big aspect of it. I think the other one is just and it comes back to finding those people, but it's getting into the variety of the work and the things we're doing and the excitement around the types of things we're doing and to be able to say, hey, listen, I'm doing in the course of a year, I could do 20 projects. And they're not all the same project. They're a variety of different things. And again, as we recruit, I think some folks gravitate. They're super excited about that kind of stuff. And others, you find pretty quickly that they're just not. And that's okay. It's not a fit for us. Right. So I think that's a big one. I think on the retention side, again, I think everybody wants a career path. Everybody wants to have a sense of, hey, I can do these things. I have the ability to try new things. I have the ability to, not just be stuck in my role for a long time. That, I'll have the option to learn how to present to a client. I'll have the option to maybe help tell the story versus just doing the analytical aspect of it. So I think as we look at the folks we have and keeping them engaged, I think it's important to understand that we want people that are curious, and curious people also want to grow as well. So I think providing those opportunities for them to grow, whether it's individually, like taking on this other piece, or working with somebody else and coaching them, like there's so many different pieces of it. But just being mindful, I just had a conversation the other day about, hey, how do we potentially, do an internship program to kind of help folks kind of learn, from a management standpoint. Maybe some of the junior folks can learn, how to manage some other resources, and also potentially create an environment to bring, folks that have tried it. We've learned together, and we feel like, hey, they're a good fit before we get to that interview process. So I think there's many aspects of it, but I would say those are probably the primary things from a acquisition versus retention.
Very well articulated. So one of the key factors with St. Onge, and one of the amazing things you do, as you mentioned earlier, is that you're ultimately affecting millions of people, through your impact on the healthcare industry. The healthcare industry right now is evolving quite quickly. What emerging trends are you seeing among healthcare systems that they need to be prepared for, and maybe that St. Onge could assist with?
I think I speak a lot about this at conferences, and I get different responses. But I will say that the delivery to the home, or delivering care at the home, I think, meaning your house, is going to be more and more of a thing. I mean, telemedicine, everything else. So I think, as you mentioned earlier about generations, if you're in the tail end of your career or your environment, you're saying, hey, listen, I'm just used to going to somewhere. I'm used to going to a building. Younger generations, they'd rather just be on their phone. They'd rather have a televisit. I'd rather you mail my prescription to my house. I would rather you ship whatever you need to me, or if the care has to come to my house, you show up, when it works for me. And those things are coordinated. I think if you start delivering care at the home, one thing is having 5 hospitals or 10 ambulatory locations, but now you start saying thousands and thousands of care points. The logistics aspect of it becomes significant. And I think a lot of these health systems, if they don't consider the logistics aspect of it, I think it's going to be a detriment to them. And I think, I made a comment maybe a year or so ago at a conference, and literally everybody in the room laughed at me, to be clear. But I said, in 5 to 10 years, the delivery of care is going to be about logistics. It's not really about doctors and nurses. And I was being a little bit, I was being a little bit over the top just to make a point. But the point is, right now, as a patient, you come into the hospital and you are waiting, which is why we have waiting rooms, and you're waiting for the resource. In the future, if you flip that, now the physician and nurses and technicians and other people are now waiting for the patient. They're waiting for the delivery of the materials they need, the delivery of whatever it is. And if that stuff's not synchronized, and I don't have the luxury of getting an extra item from the supply room, and it all needs to be there, and it's not, that's going to potentially delay the care model. So I think there's the logistics aspect of it is real. And I think the different industries are very fragmented in how they deliver services, that business to business environment versus now I'm in a business to consumer environment. It's just different. And I think if these health systems don't get ahead of it, I think they're going to fall behind.
That's very insightful. You make some great points there. I hadn't really thought about that, but you're absolutely right. We're becoming so much more centered around our homes. We bring things to us. We have all of our products delivered. Pharmacies now deliver your medications. Why not bring your health care to the house? Like, it's just part and parcel of.
It is.
Yeah,
exactly. And I think and at the time I raised, everyone laughed at me, but I said, raise your hand how many have received a package at their house that they bought online in the last couple of days. And literally everybody raised their hand. I said,
of course.
How many people were disappointed in how long it took for the package to arrive? And about half of the people raised their hand. I said, so what if we said that it was your healthcare? How would you? And you wouldn't be happy with it. You'd be like, yeah, I'd rather go somewhere else.
Absolutely. And if I'm going to wait 3 hours to see a doctor, I'd like to wait at home. I mean, that's just so much less painful than driving somewhere and waiting.
Absolutely.
Very interesting. I can relate to that with the package. When Amazon first launched and you were buying things, it was like, oh, you get it delivered to your house in a few days. It's so exciting. And now, literally, I think I was online like, where's my same day delivery product? I
know you just get used to it. Yeah,
you do. You really do. So one of the big things in industries today is AI. Do you see AI as a major disruptor in healthcare as well?
I do. I think it will in the next couple of years. I just think there's a level of excitement about it, but at some point it has to kind of settle into like what are the key use cases. I think there's a lot of activity and discussion around just communication, customer service. Can you use AI as a mechanism to provide updates to, hey, where is this package or where is this or where is that? When's this being delivered? So I think because I think that's always a pain point for health systems. It's just that communication of where things are. Is it delayed? Is there a substitute? Is there different options out there? I think that's kind of maybe a initial step, but I do think it's going to be very disruptive over time. I think we'll find, will it eliminate a bunch of the jobs? In some sense, I think yes, but I think there is a physical aspect of it. I think if you got into the point where you have robotics and you're delivering supplies within a facility and you're putting it physically restocking shelves in a hospital with robots, then that could be even more disruptive. But I think there's a lot there. I think the underlying concern is, I would call it the teaching, and to be able to use the data you have, and a lot of the data and the granularity of the data that is collected today is not great. So the question is, it's making decisions or recommendations or some sort of insights into a data set that's not overly detailed. So I think there's more from a support services standpoint. I do think from a clinical standpoint, the reading of an MRI or CT or whatever, or being able to like think about, hey, Tom Redding's in the hospital and he has these vitals, this age, this demographic, and I can start to predict what you're gonna need, or what I think there's a lot there. I don't think we remotely scratch the surface yet, but I think it's wide open for sure.
I would definitely agree with that. I think you're absolutely right. It makes sense. It'll start with more basics things like the customer service and seeing where things are, scheduling, updating wait times, thing of that nature.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I think that's a natural fit, but I do think there's a lot that could be done. It's just, yeah, what does that mean? And do we talk about hallucination of things, it's looking and it's referencing. I mean, again, for me, I made this comment, a couple years ago, and there was this conversation about the future of healthcare in 100 years. And I said, I'll be honest with you, like, I don't think there's going to be any doctors in 100 years. We won't need doctors.
So
and everybody was like, please, no. Why would you say that? I'm like, I'm saying this to be almost provocative, but like, you think about it in the context of like, if a doctor sees X amount of patients per year, and now you start to fast forward and say, looking at all these data sets and looking at these things, I could compare billions of people very quickly and I could start to predict what they're going to have or what I should do or how should I diagnose them, because you're only as good as the doctor that you're working with. And if they are new in their career or they've been around for 50 years, like I've gone to dermatologist, the guy like he's been around for 50 years. And I've gone to some that are in the, earlier in their career, and it's like, it's vastly different in how quickly they assess what they're doing. So now you fast forward and say you have maybe billions of data points. It changes the game.
Absolutely. And then you combine that with what you were talking about earlier about providing the healthcare into the home. You combine that with the AI, you've got these perfect solution.
Yeah. And again, it's a little bit over the top, but again, I think it's just, you could paint a picture of what it could be for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, we are living in a new era, things that we never, or at least with things when I was younger, you only saw in science fiction, currently exist. So
I know. Yeah,
can never say never anymore.
Pretty much. Yeah.
So can you give me an example of a transformative solution your team developed that had a measurable impact on patient care or operational performance?
Yeah, I think one that maybe comes to mind, and it's we did some work with a large hospital that was doing a major expansion, and they were in the midst of I would say doing some operational planning and budgeting for the opening of this new facility. And again, when you think about adding millions of square feet to a campus, it immediately increases your costs. You get more nurses, you get more transporters, and in this scenario, was more of analytical work that we did, but it was around patient transport. And you think about, somebody said, hey, I did my own math and I came up with, $3 million in incremental transporters. The campus is bigger, it takes more, we want to maintain our service times, whatever. And we created a discrete event simulation model, again, 3D, a discrete event simulation model. And we looked at the entire movement of patients to and from, where there was construction happening throughout the campus. And we did all this work and we came back and said it was really like about $500,000 in annual costs for transporters that needed. At the time you do all this work and, someone's like, okay, well, that's a significant savings. And, I'm glad we went through this exercise. And then you fast forward and you go back and you find out, hey, how did it work? And they would say, oh, well, it seemed close enough. So we just figured we would just keep the same staff we had. And they realized that their transport times went up, their response times went up, that, everything goes out of whack. So they end up hiring the people that we had said and organizing the folks in the way that we had recommended. And they were like, yeah, all the service times came right back in line. It's like, so in those scenarios, somebody, says, hey, I have this, rudimentary way of coming up with a budget for my head count for some particular department, and for us to be able to study that and be able to make some recommendations, and for them to quite frankly test it and realize that what we had recommended was actually was actionable and practical in the work that they were doing. So again, I thought that was a good example where it was like, you do all this work and then someone's like, hey, it's close enough, and then realize like close enough isn't good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to follow your recommendations, and then they realize after they do it, they're like, wow, we should have followed it to begin with. So
yeah, some people need to learn lessons the hard way, right?
yeah, sometimes you have to try it. It's like, close enough. Sometimes it's like, yeah, that's not good enough though.
And that very much parallels what we were talking about in the clinical space, where it depends on the experience and the knowledge of the physician. Here, St. Onge can leverage experience of dealing with multiple healthcare systems of all different sizes and natures,
Exactly.
whereas whoever is in-house, if you will, at the system may not, have access to that level of experience, may not have any experience, right, trying to optimize an operational aspect of the healthcare system.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that's probably one that comes to mind.
That's interesting. Very interesting. I love the 3D modeling, and how you were able to work that out to figure out the optimal paths and to go around construction. Very innovative.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because it was funny because we did the work and the pathway showed a lot of folks going through the emergency department. And at the time, the director of the emergency department, the guy just like stood up and was like angry. And I was
disrupting his work.
Yeah, and then realized, like, you think about the pathways you're taking and the impact it has, like, but it was real though, and they realized like what they had to do to kind of maybe from a pathway standpoint to change those paths so people aren't coming through the department, and it forced a change, physical change.
Yeah, that's really cool. So, any advice you want to give to someone who's starting a career in healthcare consulting, is looking to kind of grow up to be you?
Well, I wouldn't recommend that, but no, no, but no, I think if somebody's starting in their career, I think it's easy to say, and feel, for lack of better words, insecure about, hey, I don't know something. I would just say there's a lot of smart people around you. There's a lot of resources that are available out there, whether it's internal or external, and to be able to learn and to be able to ask questions and not feel like, well, it's a dumb question. I would say if you have a question, you would ask the team. You might not ask the client that specific question, but I think some of that judgment on, when do you ask and who do you ask, and I think is important because we've had, younger folks that have come in and, they're like scared to death to ask a question, and they spin their wheels or go in circles, or they say they haven't figured out, but they don't. And then they're just wasting a lot of time. So I think just being humble enough to be able to ask questions and to say, I don't know, and want to be eager to learn. I think it's half the battle. I know when I joined St. Onge almost 18 years ago, I was super eager to learn. I wanted to figure things out. I wanted to try new things. I'm like, hey, give me whatever projects. That didn't matter to me. I just wanted to like work through them. And I think folks that have that mindset, I think will be successful.
Mm-hmm. Probably true across any industry.
Oh, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So we talked a lot about the different aspects of healthcare and what St. Ange is doing, AI and different things that could affect it. What do you see as the predictions for the healthcare industry or for what you guys are doing just in the next, say, 12 to 18 months, 24 months? Like, what are the immediate predictions you might have? Any challenges?
Well, I mean, I think there, from a challenge standpoint, I think there's a lot of unknowns on, some of the activities, governmental activities that might impact the healthcare industry or the expectations around, how you should deliver care. But I think that's up and put it to the side. I think for us is there's a lot of you know pressure around just making sure that these health systems are spending their money wisely. So again, helping them work through, what should you buy, how should you buy it, how should you run your operation. I think that in the next 12 months, I mean, we've seen that, the margins for health systems turn to, from a negative to a positive standpoint, but probably not going to get back to where we were pre-COVID. But I think it's a matter of trying to how do you work more efficiently with the resources you have. I mean, I think we have more and more pressure from our clients, like, hey, I don't have the resources for this, I don't have the resources for that, and that's a theme across every client. So it's like, how do you help them work through those challenges, knowing that the people aren't there, and whether that's the use of robotics to supplement or automation or whatever it is. I think we have
Mm,
to continue to help them think differently, and because
mhm.
because some of these constraints aren't relieving themselves. There's more folks leaving the work environment, retirements, whatever, early retirements, and it's going to continue. So I think
Mhm.
that's an important aspect to making sure that we continue to be able to provide that service and that support for them.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that won't change is the demand for healthcare, right? People still will need help.
Yeah. And as the environment changes, and like the expectations of, hey, I'm going through the home, or I'm going now, I just health systems are getting bigger, and maybe they went from two hospitals, now they're at six hospitals, and like now it gets harder to manage, and what should we do differently? And it's a good thing. It's never ending.
Right.
It's never
Yeah,
never ending change. It's just
that's
it's
true.
just we got to keep adapting and keep helping them and try to figure out what's next for them. And yeah, it can
Uh,
take years for what it's worth.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, can you tell our listeners where they can learn more about St. Ange and maybe reach out to you?
I would say go to stonge.com, www.stonge.com. I would also look up again Tom Redding on, at St. Ange on LinkedIn. Again, I would just type in Tom Redding and St. Ange, and it'll pop right to the top. So I would just say, certainly, folks that are listening and have some ideas, or I always like to brainstorm on different things people are seeing, like what the impact is that they're seeing on the industry. Again, I think for me, it's important to stay connected, not just to the work we're doing, but also kind of how the industry is changing, or some of the pain points that people are seeing. And I think just having all those conversations is important. Again, one is stay relevant in the industry, but two is make sure that we're adding value to the industry as well. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's an important piece of it.
Very interesting. So before I let you go, Tom, I do have one final question, which I
Mm-hmm.
did not prepare you for, but it is
Oh,
our
sure.
traditional last question on the Think Factory podcast. And that is, what keeps you up at night?
Um, what keeps me up? Yeah, I think for me, I guess from a St. Ange standpoint, it's just making sure that we are keeping our employees engaged in what they're doing, and that we're supporting them every which way we can. So whether that's helping them personally, professionally, but also just the tools that we have. I think, 'cause for me, that's an important aspect of it, because again, we are a people business. Again, as consultants and engineers, that's how our work is being done. So again, I want to make sure those folks have that opportunity. I think the second thing I just mentioned is, like, I think staying relevant in the industry, I think, is incredibly important to me. I think it's easy to say, hey, we're doing good, we're growing, we're doing good work for good clients. But again, I don't for me, I'm like, that's great now, but you fast forward 5 years from now, I don't want to be in a position where we're saying, hey, we're slipping down the list, or we're not getting the biggest and best projects. We're not working for the best clients. Like, again, it's like, I think it's incredibly important for us to be on the front edge and helping clients and be the leader in the space we're in. And again, it might be the space we're in today, and fast forward 5 years from now, it might be slightly different. But again, I think it's a matter of, like, again, staying relevant and helping our employees be the best they can be is incredibly important to me.
You make an excellent point. That's terrific. Well, thank you, Tom, for joining me today.
Yeah, no problem. I appreciate the opportunity. And so it's certainly a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, everyone. This has been the Think Factories Workplace Podcast with Tom Redding. I'm Alka Bahal, signing off.